Welcome to Rooting for You, a seasonal gardening podcast for non-experts. I'm Tess, and I know nothing.
And I'm Alyce, and I know some things.
Each week we'll chat about one gardening topic and then discuss the effort-reward payoff by asking, is the juice worth the squeeze? Just a heads up, there might be a bit of swearing in this episode. You've been warned. One of our very first episodes was how to plant a plant. In that episode, we discussed a step-by-step guide to planting a seedling, which is a bit of a cheat because someone's already planted a seed and got it started for you. Now, I think planting from a seedling is excellent. You can buy yourself a little bit more time if you're running a bit late in the season, and there's a little less chance that the slugs and snails will come along and chomp all your baby plants. Having said that, today we're talking about how to plant from seed. So my very first question for you, Alyce, is why should we know how to grow from a seed?
I thought you'd start with that question, Tess, so I've pre-prepared a little list.
Fabulous.
There are actually heaps of benefits, and I'm going to go through them all in no particular order, and I think different benefits will speak to different people, which is kind of like, you know, with our squeezy juice matrix, like it all depends on your values and what's important to you as to what will appeal. But I think actually everyone will find something on this list sounds pretty good. So to get into it, firstly, it is so cheap. You will save so much money. A packet of seeds will cost you, $1.25. And if you get 20 zucchini seeds in that packet, I mean, imagine how many, you would get, 100 kilos of zucchinis off that. It is so, so economical. And yeah, I mean, a seedling, as you say, they have their benefits, but I mean, they're not cheap to purchase when you consider how many plants you could grow for that same amount of money when you've grown from seed.
And this is a really, probably a really basic question, but one seed will be one seedling.
Yes.
And of a packet of whatever seeds, are they all growable, if that makes sense? Are they each, if you plant each one of them in the same correct way with enough space and light and all of that jazz, you can get out of a handful of zucchini seeds the same amount of zucchini plants?
It's actually such an interesting thing that you've asked, because there's a whole discussion about germination rates of seeds, and that's exactly what you're talking about, is how many seeds on average are going to germinate and grow a plant. It's never going to be 100%. So if you plant 10 seeds, you may get 10 plants, because it's a probability thing. But on the balance of probabilities, if you planted 10 seeds, I would say most, if you did it all properly, you'll get 9 plants.
Wow. So that's still, for the $1 or $2 for the seed packet, you're getting 9 zucchini plants.
Exactly. And on a seed packet, actually, it will always say the germination rate percentage.
Ooh.
So some you look at and they're like 99%. So it's like saying if you plant 100 seeds, you're going to get 99 plants. So there you're like, okay, I can pretty much guarantee if I plant this, I'm going to get a plant. So I would say the lowest germination rates you ever see on a seed packet are like 85%.
Okay.
Maybe 80, which is still incredibly high when you think you plant 10 and you're going to get 8.5.
Is there anything to be said for buying seeds from a reputable seed vendor?
Yeah, 100%, because there's two issues. One, you could just get seeds that are old, or they haven't been stored properly, or they haven't been harvested properly, so they just don't germinate. That's the first problem. And the second issue you can get is, by looking at a seed, you can't tell. You're taking the grower or the seller's word that is a Black Beauty zucchini. You don't actually know. You might even be able to tell it's a zucchini seed, but you don't know what type it is. So there's quite an issue with cross-pollination that can go on, where then the seed isn't producing what's called a Truda type. So you might think you're getting a Black Beauty zucchini, but you're getting some hybrid, very unproductive zucchini. So to make sure you're actually getting the plant that you want to get, you do want to get them from a reputable supplier.
So maybe that's a little bit more expensive, but it is still dirt cheap compared to buying a seedling.
Well, definitely. But I mean, hilariously, the company that we're doing our competition with at the moment, the Seed Collection, I mean, they're the cheapest on the market, and I've found their germination rates to be the best. So I'd say definitely if you're paying more, that is a guarantee of quality, but not necessarily. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for reputation in the gardening world. And if you get on any gardening forum, people are going to tell you, like, if they've purchased seeds from someone and they didn't germinate, someone's going to be in there saying, and people that they like companies that they like, people are also going to be in there promoting. So, get in contact with something like that and you'll get a pretty good idea.
Yeah, okay.
But another question that you asked actually in there that I didn't quite cover is one seed is one plant. Now, in the case of a radish, one seed is one radish. But in the case of a zucchini, one seed is one zucchini plant, which may give you
A bunch of zucchinis.
a hell of a lot of zucchinis, like kilos and kilos and kilos of zucchinis off one plant. So the productivity is not necessarily related to the number of seeds. And you'll see when you buy pumpkin seeds, you might only get 10 seeds in the pack, which sounds tiny. But if you think about it, if you plant them all, you get 9 pumpkin vines and you get all the pumpkins off that. I mean, you could be eating pumpkin every meal for the next year.
Yeah.
Whereas something like, radishes or lettuce or something like that, you'll get, you could get 1,000 seeds in a packet. Mm-hmm. So it will be relative to the kind of produce you'll get off it.
Okay. So benefit 1, cost effective.
Very cost effective. The cheapest way you will ever feed yourself is with seeds. Now, the second benefit is my favorite, and this is the amazing variety of plants that you can get and the amazing variety of food, types of food that you've never even tasted before that is so much better than anything available in the supermarket. And even with seedlings, like, I'm a big fan of seedlings, but if you go to any nursery, like, they're still just providing you with seedlings of like the really common types of veggies that you'd be getting in the supermarket anyway. Like my favorite pumpkin is called a potty marron or a red curry. You're never going to buy that in a shop as a pumpkin, and you're also never going to buy that seedling, at a nursery to grow. So if I want to grow my potty marrons or my red curries, which I do, I have to grow from seed. You know how much I love the variety, the options, the colours, the flavours, even stuff, more practical things like the length of time to harvest. Like some pumpkins you can grow will take 13 weeks until you can harvest a pumpkin, which is very short. Some might take up to 20. So, if you really want your pumpkin sooner, then you're going to pick a variety that's early. But if you're buying from seedlings, you just don't have that kind of control or that kind of access to information with those kind of details that you do when you go from seed.
Yeah, so it really opens up a whole world for you.
It really does. Yeah, and I would say the only plant that you get a decent variety at a nursery is a tomato. You'll get a lot of good tomatoes at a nursery, but I'd say anything else, if you're only sticking to seedlings from a nursery, you're selling yourself short as far as what you can grow and therefore what you can eat.
Okay. Next one.
Third benefit is there's actually a lot less of an environmental impact from growing from seeds yourself. You've purchased, a small, tiny bag of seeds. They're going to grow heaps of plants for you. You're going to use your own plastic containers that you're going to reuse time and time again. You're going to grow them just in nature, so to speak, whereas commercially seedlings are grown, in heated greenhouses, under grow lights. There's a lot of water used. There's actually a lot of resources used to get a commercial seedling to the right size on the right date and get it shipped to the nursery at the right time. So, if part of growing food for you is about lessening your environmental impact and being more sustainable, then seeds are 100% the way to go. Much, much, much better for the environment. Another benefit is how the plants are grown. So again, one of the reasons I really like growing my own food is that I know it doesn't have pesticides on it. I know it's grown organically. Whereas when I'm buying a seedling, who knows what kind of inputs have been used on that plant to get it to the point where we're taking it home. So if the pesticides and kind of the control over the chemicals is a factor, 100% start that seed from scratch yourself and you know exactly what's been on it and more importantly what hasn't been. Plants are often healthier when you grow them from seed yourself because often when you get them from nurseries, and we've discussed this before, they're often root bound. And this is not the end of the world. If anyone listening doesn't know what root bound is, when you kind of pull a seedling out of its tray and it's like spun up like
a web of roots.
Yeah, like a ball of wool of roots rather than soil. That's actually, it's actually detrimental to the plant, and it will probably recover and produce a fairly decent crop, but it will never be its full potential because it had that stunting when it was young. So by growing it from seed ourselves, we can pick the perfect time to plant it out. Now, having said this, obviously you can go to a nursery and find a plant that's not pot bound, so look out for that. But I do find more often than not, they are pot bound because people are wanting the seedling to look big and lush, but the cost of that is it's actually been too long in its little pot. Now, the last benefit is it's basically magic, right? You put a seed that's something that we would discard of all the time. Like you eat an apple, it has seeds in it. You put it in the bin, or hopefully you put it in the podcast. You put it in the podcast, put it in the compost because you've listened to this podcast. You know, that seed can then turn into food. Like, it's amazing. And seeing it pop up from the soil is incredibly rewarding. And again, if kids are involved, I would say no need to read Harry Potter and that kind of magic. We've got it in the ground right here. So I like that benefit.
On that, there is that beautiful quote from Sophie Thompson, or Sophie's Patch on Instagram. It's, is there anything more optimistic than planting a seed? And I love that thought so much, because it just, as you say, it inspires these thoughts of magic and optimism and wonder about how growing a plant from such a small, tiny little thing. And that's, it's exciting.
It's like creating sustenance from nothing, like on a fundamental level. Like, yeah, that's pretty optimistic. That's pretty exciting. So I do think, you know, there's wonder and joy in it. And often in this podcast, I've noticed myself simply going for the logistics of something. Like the bee episode, I was very much on the logistics of this and that and this is what has to happen type thing. But when I listened to it back myself, I actually thought, you didn't even mention, you know, I'm glad you mentioned it, Tess, but I didn't even mention like just how much joy it gives me in and of itself. So that's the benefits. Have I sold you that it's worth continuing this discussion on growing from seed?
You definitely have. And I know that I always have my seedlings to fall back on when I have left it too late in the season, for example. But you definitely have sold me on planting from seed. And it sounds like as well, if you have kids in your household, this could be a really fun thing to do with them, and to, you know, teach them about food and produce and all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say realistically, you, me, probably most people listening are going to grow a mix of things from seed and a mix of things from seedling. Whether that mix is 70-30 or 50-50, you know, that might depend on the person. But I think realistically, the average at-home gardener is going to be using both, and they both have their benefits. So now that we are interested in doing it, we need to discuss how we're going to do it. And there's actually two ways we can grow from seed. The first is what's called direct sow. So this is when we sow the seed in the ground in the exact spot that it's going to live out its whole life.
So this is what I did with my lettuce mix.
Yes, that is exactly what you did.
Got it.
So that's called the direct sow. When we did our radishes episode, I said explicitly there, you know, you would sow the radishes direct sow where they're going to live for their whole life. So that's option one.
Is it for all kind of those rooty vegetables like radishes and carrots, potatoes? Are they all falling into the direct sow family?
Well, bang on. I will talk about like the different ones and when to know when to do which, but you are actually spot on that the root vegetables that have the taproot, so the radishes, the carrots, the beetroots, they really hate being transplanted. So they are ones that I would say, you know, for the most part, if you can, definitely direct sow.
Okay, option two.
Option two is you sow in containers, and then you're creating a seedling just like the nursery has, but instead of buying it, you've made it yourself.
Got it.
So this is called the container growing. So we've got the direct sowing and the container growing.
Okay.
So the container growing ones, we grow them as seedlings just like the nursery does, and then we plant them in their final home like we discussed in the How to Plant a Plant episode. So that's the two options. Now, the big question is, how do we know which one to do?
Well, that's exactly the question. How do you know which one to do?
That is exactly the question. And there's actually so much that goes into deciding this that I think it's really worth fleshing out the discussion. The different factors that will depend on whether you direct sow or container grow is the type of seed. And you've already preempted this. Root veggies really don't like being transplanted. Really tiny seeds often are better grown in containers as well, because they can be washed away or things like that outside. Okay. So the type of seed. Next is the space you have. If you have a small garden like you do, Tess, and you currently have your broccoli in the garden, if you only direct sow, then you have to wait until that broccoli crop is completely finished and you're pulled it out before you even sow your tomato for summer.
Yes. So you're getting like a little garden, an additional space in your garden bed.
Exactly. So for
the crossover between the seasons. Love this idea.
Bang on. So if you are interested in getting as much food as humanly possible from the space you've got, container growing is going to be your best friend, because you can have that tomato growing out on your deck in its little pot for 4 weeks before
It's
it needs
time
to
to-
go into the garden. So then your broccoli got an extra 4 weeks in the garden. And
yes,
you can see,
I like this.
yeah, I am obsessed with this. This is probably the reason why I do so much container growing, is mainly just because I want to get the most out of every space in my garden bed. And to me, starting a seed in the garden bed almost feels like a waste, because I'm like, I could have had something else going in there and had that elsewhere. I'm getting into the benefits a bit here, so I'll just tone it down. So yeah, it's the space you have and how intensely you want to garden that space will depend on whether you direct sow or container grow. The weather. Now, down here in chilly Victoria, chilly Melbourne, you can't grow a tomato in the garden today. If you put a tomato seed in the garden, it's not going to germinate. It's too cold. Whereas we can grow that tomato inside or under some warm sheltered area, and we can actually get that tomato growing earlier than what we could otherwise. And then once it's warmer, we can just plant that seedling, that advanced seedling, in the garden, and that tomato plant is going to be 6 weeks ahead than if we planted a seed, which means we're probably going to get tomatoes 4 weeks ahead.
You can actually do this inside.
Yes, you can. So when I say in containers, and again, this is more into the nitty gritty, but I'm talking about in containers under some kind of shelter or protection, whether that be a greenhouse or whether that be inside. Mm-hmm. And when I say greenhouse, I don't want you to think of like my massive monstrosity of like a walk-in greenhouse. Like I'm talking like a greenhouse that's the size of a case of beer.
Okay.
Just like a little on deck, like you could have it sitting on your deck outside.
Yeah, right.
So the weather, and again, like if you're in like northern New South Wales, for anyone that's in Australia, or like somewhere really warm, maybe that doesn't matter as much because you can grow a tomato from seed a lot earlier. But if you're trying to kind of get the most out of your warmer weather, then you will be wanting to container grow rather than direct sow. And it also just comes down to personal preference as well. Like it's actually a lot easier to direct sow, but then again, I quite like the look of everything being neat and tidy in the garden, which I find the container,
So that's quite a personal preference.
That is quite a personal preference. It's really not impacting on anything other than
Your preferences. Yeah.
My preferences. So I do find container growing means that then when I plant it out, everything's nice and neat. There's a lot of different factors that come into deciding this, but often the seed packet will actually indicate a preference for that seed. So taking aside, the kind of intensive gardening or the weather or anything like that, it'll often say on the seed packet which one you should go with. Mm-hmm. And what I do find quite confusing is often it doesn't say direct sow or container grow. It has a little picture. So
Okay.
So yeah, and look, once you know what the picture means, it makes sense. But I reckon I would like look at seed packets for like years and I could see this picture and I didn't actually know what it was telling me. So what the little picture is telling you is if it is this like one looks like a little tray with shoots coming up. So it's basically a U with some eyes coming out of it. That's saying grow it in a container. And if it's got some like rough scatter pattern of dots, that means direct sow it.
Is this international standard?
Look, I'm sure it differs from seed company to seed company, but all I want people to know is it's not necessarily going to be explicitly said in the way that I have said it. You know what would be funny? Like, there's people listening all around the world. Like, send us photos of the little descriptor that your seed packets use, and let's see the difference. What we've got.
Maybe there is international standard.
Maybe there is. Yeah, I'd like to know.
Can I ask a question about container growing and the greenhouse, even if it's just a mini greenhouse? Is that because you want it to be warmer and more protected? Like, is it environmental reasons why you put it in a greenhouse?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's just gonna protect it. It's gonna make it warmer. And as we've discussed in other episodes, like the warmer it is, the faster something germinates and the faster it grows.
And these mini greenhouses, are they protected from slugs and snails?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the benefits of the container growing and the disadvantage of the direct sow is that slugs and snails and birds find tender young seedlings very appealing, whereas having it in that closed area means that it's protected. So that actually is a really big benefit, I think. Like I've discussed it on here. I've had slugs and snails like decimate my seed crop, my seedlings, like overnight. Whereas when it's in a container and then it's in a little protected greenhouse, it's possible, definitely, stuff can get in there, but for the most part, they're going to be totally fine and totally protected. And like we discussed in the slugs and snails episode, you just got to get them big enough that the slugs and snails can't kill them. And by doing that in a container, then by the time they're out in the open, we've just got so much more control. So you'll lose a lot less seedlings.
Okay.
So I'm giving you a lot of benefits of the container growing.
Yeah,
You can
I'm
tell
sold
a
on the
fan.
container growing.
Yes. The negative of the old container growing is that it just takes a lot more effort.
Okay.
So you think about it that, say we do the direct sow, we've planted it in the ground, we water it, but other than that, like it's
You're
there,
done.
it's
Yeah.
staying there. You've got to manage the slugs and snails potentially, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, should it go well, it's brilliant. Like it's like a 1 minute job and then you've got the whole plant and all the crops. It saves you a lot of time. With the container growing, you've got to plant it, which is about the same effort, but then you've got to keep it moist. You have to keep it moist if it's direct sown as well, but think about a small punnet of seedlings, like on a warm day, that's going to dry out way faster than like a big garden bed is. So you're going to have to water it a lot more and be quite diligent about checking the moisture, because the one thing, and we'll again, this is getting into the nitty-gritty of actually growing, but you don't want that seed to dry out, because once it dries out once, it may never come back. It does make it, there's a lot more care that's needed post-planting. And then, you know, when that seed is germinated and becomes a seedling, it then needs to be planted out in the gardens. Then we've got that whole planting a plant step again. So it's the twofold, whereas the direct sow is just once in position, it's there forever. So if you are the lazy gardener, you are definitely going to be a fan of the direct sow. If your garden is something that you are super committed to and you want to get as much out of it, you want to get those tomatoes as early as humanly possible, you want everything to look uniform and pretty, you're going to be a container grower.
Okay.
In reality, and this is how I do it, some things I'm going to do in containers and some things I'm going to direct sow. Things I'm a fan of direct sowing are rocket, mustards, radish, beetroot, carrots, peas. I like direct sowing them. I'm going to say most other things I grow in containers.
Okay, but definitely not the root vegetables.
Definitely not the root vegetables. Although I will say, like, you do often see beetroot and carrot in seedling punnets at the nursery. Like, I never buy them, but I do wonder.
It must be possible then.
It's definitely possible. You're just probably going to lose more, or they're, you know, going to be a bit stunted or something like that. So I would say everyone's going to find the mix that works for them based on those factors. And anything you can do either for anything.
Yeah.
It's just some things are more suited to it than others. Like rocket, how you bought rocket seedlings recently or a few months ago.
The rocket seedlings went very well.
Well, they did actually go very well and they looked great in your garden. But I did think, I was like, I think probably next time just grow that from seed. But the point is you can do either. Sorry, when I say grow from seed, I mean direct sow from seed. So that's kind of the advantages and the disadvantages of the two.
I mean, I think that they both sound achievable. Clearly, they've got pros and cons of both. I'm very keen to start getting into the nitty-gritty of it, but what I'm thinking is maybe we break this up and do it as a two-parter, because it's a huge amount of information to get at one go. So let's end there and we'll come back next week and we'll do the nitty-gritty of getting into how we actually plant from seed for both the container growing and the direct sow.
Are you trying to shut me up? No, I think that's a really good idea. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to gloss over the details of this, because often people write about it, they talk about it, and they're just like, you plant the seed. And like, you know, as discussed, this gardening podcast is for beginners to demystify it. And we're going to go into all the details of exactly what that looks like.
So we're just dropping in with a little bonus to tell you all about our Instagram giveaway that we've teamed up with the Seed Collection. Before I remind you of how to enter, at least let's run through what is in the giveaway prize pack.
So I spent a lot of time really picking like exactly what we were going to put in this and what would be like the most essential things that a beginner gardener could start with or should start with. So if you win the prize, I mean, that's the best thing ever, right? But even if you don't, I think this is actually like a pretty good list of like some beginner gardening equipment. So the first thing in it is actually a mini greenhouse, which is very fitting in this discussion, because if you're doing your container growing, your mini greenhouse is going to be absolutely brilliant for starting those seedlings and protecting them. It's going to be warmer. It's going to protect from the slugs and snails. It actually also keeps the moisture in, because you think about if you had something wet and you put it in a plastic container, it's going to stay much wetter than if you had it out on the bench, like you think about food in the fridge or whatever. So it actually helps with the moisture regulation as well. So one of these, when you're growing from seed, I think are essential. And then we have 10 seed varieties that I picked to be my favorite 10 for a beginner, and this was impossible.
What have we got in there?
The seed collection have so many seeds. I was really struggling, but I'll list them out. So we've got basil. This is your kind of common garden variety basil. I usually grow more creative things, but everyone loves basil so much.
Yeah, and as a beginner, it's what you want.
It's a staple.
It's a staple, 100%.
Red bunching onions, which are spring onions, and they're called red beard. So they've actually got a red end on them, not a white end. Very fancy. Tomato black cherry. So this has got like a purpley black colour to it, different to what you'll buy. I really like them. I grow them every year. The radish Easter egg, which is the variety I talked about in the radish episode. All the different colours, white, pink, purple, red, the whole works. Nasturtiums, which are my favourite edible flower. This is the variety Salmon Baby, which is a nice apricot colour. We've got snow peas. They're really easy to grow. We've got bush beans, which are also really easy to grow. Zucchini Black Beauty, which is your kind of supermarket variety zucchini, but it is incredibly prolific. You're going to get more zucchinis than you could ever want from that seed. So I think it is a good one for beginners to start with. Rocket, which we know is just one of my favourite beginner crops of all time. So go back to the rocket and salad greens episode for that one. Lettuce. We've got cinnamon lettuce, which is a red frilly lettuce. And remember in the salad greens episode, we talked about how some of the lettuces you have to harvest the whole thing and some you can just harvest the outer leaves. This is one of the outer leaf varieties, which we love. And then last
cut and come again?
The cut and come again. And last off, silver beet, rainbow chard. So this is your regular silver beet, but we've got the yellow, the orange, the pink, the purple, the red, kind of all the colours of silver beet. You'll just be so healthy.
And one silly question here.
Never.
Can you store seeds? So, like, if I don't have space to do all of those vegetables in this season coming up, can I hold on to them for next season?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, fantastic. So it's not just this year that we've got you sorted in this giveaway pack. We've got you sorted for years.
Well, also, like, you've got 20 zucchini black beauty seeds there or whatever. So, I mean, you're not going to be planting 20 zucchini plants. You can absolutely store seeds. The trick is you want to store them in a cool, non-direct sunlight type place in like a sealed container. So actually the fridge is really good. Like I don't because I've got a lot of other crap in my fridge, but ideally you store seeds in the fridge, but they will last for a couple of years definitely. So yes, we've got you sorted this year, but we've probably got you sorted for the next couple also. So then what's actually quite cute is we've got these jiffy pots. I think they're called jiffy pots or core pots. And what they are is they're pots, but they're made out of a biodegradable material. So what you can do is grow your zucchini in the pot, the biodegradable pot. And then once the plant is big enough to plant out, you just plant the whole pot in the ground.
Whoa, how easy is that?
It's actually brilliant, and it's especially brilliant for plants that don't like being transplanted. It's actually zucchinis don't like being transplanted. They're one that's would usually say direct sow, but I don't want to direct sow them. I want to get them in early for the 100 reasons listed earlier. I would always grow them in these biodegradable pots and then put them straight in, and then the roots are never disturbed. So they are pretty cool. I would plant your seeds in those and then put them in your little greenhouse.
Yeah, good one.
We've got a few other bits and pieces, some twine, some plant labels, some fruit snips because you're going to be harvesting all this food. A beautiful solid garden trowel.
Yes,
which
very
you'll use
handy.
time and time again to get those seedlings in, to pull out your compost, that kind of thing. What's not pictured on the giveaway picture on Instagram, but we did post on it subsequently, is the grow bags. And I'm obsessed with the grow bags.
They're so fantastic.
So I gave Tess some, and
if you're keen to increase your actual garden space, this is brilliant. This is what you need.
It is. And the reason I thought it was so good for this kit was like, you can't, if you say to me, I've got nowhere to plant my veggies, like whoever this person is that may win, it's like you have the grow bag. Like you put the grow bag on a concrete driveway and you have a veggie patch. And the grow bag with a small and a large in the giveaway kit, but it's actually, the large one is humongous. Like you could grow a pumpkin, or you could grow a tomato, or you could grow something really decent size. Like I'm not talking some like token herb pot here. I'm talking like, this is a decent sized garden bed that you've now got instantly. Now, the last two things in the giveaway pack are the step-by-step veg patch book, which I actually sell on my website, and I really like it as a beginner's guide to growing food. I think I gave it to you.
You did.
Yeah, when Tess first said that, you know, this was like a year ago, and she's like, I'm interested in growing something. So that was
very user-friendly. It's a great book.
Yeah, like I've seen you refer to it often. Yeah, so that's in there, so you actually know what to do with all this stuff. And then lastly, my cookbook, Modern Slow Cooker, is in there because I figure that now you're growing all this food, you're gonna want some way to cook it, process it, use it, enjoy it. So that recipe book, being vegetarian, has a huge amount of veggie kind of dishes in there. So you'll be using that produce.
And this modern slow cooker book, I've tried a number of the recipes, and it really is, if I can say so, it's really modernizing the slow cooker, which is, you think of a bit fuddy-duddy and just like
the old
stews and whatever, but there's some really exciting stuff here. For the winner, immediately drop everything that you're doing and make the cheesecake, the individual pot cheesecake.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they're so good.
Not something you'd think of for the old slow cooker. And then you can make a nice berry compote with all your raspberries that you've got growing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, let me hit you up with how to enter. Just as a refresher, all the details are on the post. Look for the giveaway post, which pictures all of the goodies in it. But what you need to do is follow us at Rooting For You Pod and also the Seed Collection on Instagram. Tag a friend. Oh, I haven't mentioned this yet. There's two.
Yeah,
it's one for
two.
you and a friend. So tag your mate in the post. Both people have to be following Rooting For You and Seed Collection. And then the winner will get 2 packs.
Yeah. And the reason we really wanted to do this was like Tess and I have so loved this like joint activity together as 2 friends interested in this. So now you and your friend also can like both do it and then both have the joy of like learning, discussing and experiencing together.
And there's a few other way to get bonus entries. So posting out our post on your stories or screenshotting you listening to an episode. It is still open until the 15th, and then we'll draw the winner or announce the winner on the 19th of August.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this episode after those dates, so you've lost your chance to enter, I'd just recommend going over and following us on Instagram anyway. So next time we do this, you'll be the first entry in.
Rooting For You is hosted by Alyce and Tess. You can find us on Instagram at rootingforyoupod or email rootingforyou@alycealexandra.com.